Homiletics I, Lecture 5, Preparation Part 2, Preparation for the Ministry, Preacher, Pastor, Missionary. We're dealing with training. Last lecture was dealing with just your personal life. That's all, just that. Now training for the ministry. In the preparation of becoming a preacher, it is paramount that one gets their life in order. So if you are in the training to do that, which a lot of you are watching this now, get your life in order. Don't just go, well, my only thing I got to do is just learn the Bible and I'm good to go. That might be the easiest of the things you need to do. Almost as important as this is the training of the preacher. Almost as important as this is the training of the preacher. Well, getting your life in order is very important. I'm not sure why I wrote it that way. In pastoral theology, the whole lecture is taken to explain the importance of being trained in a church vice a parachurch training institution. We're going to go into this from 2 Timothy 2 here in just a moment. So just to reemphasize, red text, the only Bible-supported method of training anyone for any spiritual ministry or position, spiritually speaking, is via a church of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's done through churches. That's the Bible-supported way. Black text, thus, the only scriptural method of training a preacher is through a church. And it's not just any church, it needs to be a true church of the Lord's. And I believe those are only found today in Baptist churches, but not every Baptist church. I know some of you disagree vehemently with that online, but that's what I'm telling you what I believe. You go to church history and you'll learn about that. And not just any true church of the Lord's, it needs to be their own church that they're a member of. Red text, every true church is more than capable of training their members for any ministry that the Lord has called one to. At least should be more than capable, because God will equip by design that church to do what it needs to do, to fulfill what God has called them to do. Now people can resist, or end up not having anyone there, or just a few people, and then the church struggles. But if it's following in general what the Lord wants, it's capable of doing it. So you don't have to go off to some fancy, big Bible college, parachurch thing. And you shouldn't go there anyways. I also wrote here, your own church. Well, most of you, well, all the online students, I assume, are not part of this church here. Long ago I decided to, since I was filming this anyways for some of the folks that couldn't get it, that were members here, that attend here, I just put it up online for them and for anyone else. I don't mind if you use this, praise the Lord, but by design it's for the folks here. And if you can reap a benefit from it, fine, but ideally, by design, it should be your own pastor teaching you. Now many don't have a pastor who's willing to teach, or they don't believe like their pastor does, or they're not even part of a good church and this is where they're at. So, however the Lord wants to use this, I will gladly let Him. Red text, the most prominent scripture dealing with this subject, I believe, is 2 Timothy 2:2. So just know the reference there, which reads, you're going to need to know it anyway, so we might as well make it red text here. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. We'll look at every part of that, so you'll need to know the verse. First part here, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses. That's in red. So let's tear that down for this training. Usually don't do this for a college lecture, taking down a verse, but this one we are. Paul, black text, Paul the apostle, pastor, missionary extraordinaire, was speaking to little Timothy, young Timothy, the preacher that he had just trained. He was instructing Timothy how to carry on this preacher training. So Timothy was already trained by Pastor Paul, Apostle Paul, and now Paul is telling them, or him, here in 2 Timothy 2:2, what he should do. So it talks about the things that thou hast heard of me. The things. What things? You're supposed to commit these to faithful men. What things? Well, that's a good question. The things that Paul had been taught by Jesus Christ in the Arabian desert, I assume, and other things that Paul did. I assume it's what Paul knew, what he taught, what he did, his whole life, his ministry, those things. These things dealt with what spiritually happened in Paul's life following his training. Things involving Paul's testimony, godly character, solid doctrine, the fundamentals of the faith, evangelism, church planting. All the things that Paul was involved with, which was a lot. It was basically a New Testament survey / missiology / pastoral theology / homiletics / church polity 101. There may be some others in there too. The young future preacher in training needs a Timothy, or Paul taught Timothy, and Timothy was supposed to teach a faithful man. So the young people, men in training, are you can say the Timothys, but Timothy now is supposed to find these young men. So we look at that. You need to find your Timothy to train you. These things of the ministry, the things of the Bible. There are so many things to be taught. The fourth hour is a harder one. Doctrine does matter. It says it in there. All the things you've heard of me among many witnesses. Lots of people telling you about it. Faithful men and women need to be committed to all these things. So you commit to them. It's not real clear what he's talking about here. I just assume it's all that Paul did in the ministry, his doctrinal base, his life, things you've heard. B, who were these witnesses? That's a good question. The things that thou hast heard of me among what? Many witnesses. That's what you're going to commit. Paul taught many, many men. These were witnesses of what Paul taught and his lifestyle. It's like the disciples who knew Jesus. They were witnesses of, well, especially of those where he rose again and saw him. There were 500 plus witnesses to that. Paul had many witnesses to his life also. That 500 was just Jesus' resurrection. Many more knew Jesus Christ than that. Many people heard Paul teach the truths of the Bible. How did Paul teach the truths of the Bible to these folks around him? Was it Sunday school class, home Bible studies, a Bible college setup, just kind of casually? Well, I believe he was like Jesus Christ, where he taught every opportunity he could. Here, there, so it'd be like you, not that we're going to set it up this way, but you following me around, almost living with me. Maybe you go home to your family at night. Yeah, let's have it be that way. But you don't have a job really, or if you do, it's just kind of here and there. Me too. And it's on OJT 3 years. That would change our lifestyles a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's kind of how they did it. These witnesses would have credibility to these things. I mean, they knew Paul. They knew the things he was teaching. So just, Timothy, go and find out from these folks. I don't know why he used witnesses and not just what I told you to do, but these witnesses. There's a lot of, I've said the same thing to many people. It was all new, and so it was reasonable to have many others in agreement with it also. Maybe that was the reason. There have been millions of witnesses to the truths that Paul put out in that first century. Millions, yeah. And today's pastors are witnesses who are committing it to faithful men and women like you. They've witnessed the same teachings. We find it in the New Testament. There have been hundreds of thousands of faithful Baptist witnesses during the Dark Ages, yea, millions of them. Actually, it's back to that. Hundreds of thousands training faithful Baptists. But more correctly, these witnesses are collectively seen in the pages of the New Testament, which Timothy did not have at the time. I'll just be honest with you. I do not understand this 2 Timothy 2:2 on the many witnesses part, why it's so important. Why doesn't it say in the things which I have told you, Timothy, teach others also? Why didn't he say it that way? He says, the things which thou hast heard of me from other people. That's what you're going to commit, thou the faithful men. It seems like it would be better said, the things I taught you, Timothy, that's what I want you to train other men. So it matters that other people are believing it too, I guess. Maybe you understand that, but I'm having trouble with it. Thus, red text, the witnesses that we really need to pay attention to are those in the testimonies and teachings of the New Testament. So that's how I'm going to apply this. And so you need to listen to what the writers of the New Testament have said. Because we're New Testament churches. We're not Old Testament churches. We say we're Bible churches. No, I would say specifically we're New Testament churches, following the New Testament. We're not following the program of the Old Testament, we're following the program of the New Testament, though the Old Testament is used and in foundation for the New. We don't throw the Old Testament out. But where I focus at is New Testament. What I preach at is mostly New Testament, if you haven't noticed that. 90-some% of it is New Testament. There's other pastors that feel led to have most of their sermons based on Old Testament stories and then pull truths out of that. Okay, they can do what they want. But it's just a lot easier to get the truth out when you just read what the New Testament says. There it is. Don't have to have some fancy story cloaking it. Black text. Ironically, today there are many, many witnesses of error that are committing it to men and women all over the land in Bible colleges, seminaries, and churches. So there's witnesses, but it's of error. There are more of these false witnesses than of the witnesses of the things of the Bible. So this is a big problem today. We've got more error being put out there than the truth. Well, I struggle with this topic on who are the witnesses, as you can tell. Let's go on to another part here. Number 2, red text, the same. Commit thou to faithful men. This will make more sense, I think. The same things. The exact same things you're going to teach to men. So someday, I hope you do this. I exhort you to. You're going to train men and women. But men for the ministry. And you might have a little different takes on some things, but in general, the same things. Jesus Christ is God. Salvation is only this way. This is what a church is, and this is what churches do. Here's what a holy life is. These type of same things. We're not going to be sending you out if you don't believe correctly on what I would consider these same things that we're expecting you to teach on.
Right.
We'll be looking at your statement of faith. And I will want it to say, I'm almost half kidding, but I will want it to say, say it right, but also be non-amendable. Which most statements of faith are that way. But you can just toss it. The day you leave, you can take that thing wad up and throw it in the trash basket and start your church, and no one there is going to know. You can change, you can become an ecumenical infant baptizing church. Well, I guess we would know eventually. But you go, oh wow. As time goes on and as the truth passes from one person to the next, error can slip in. Each teacher may have a little different view of the doctrine than the next, yeah? And slowly but surely the truth gets changed hundreds of times over until it's far removed from the truth. Yeah, so as you pass it on, it doesn't always go exactly the same, like if you're whispering some statement in a person's ear, you know how that goes, and they whisper it and they whisper it, and they finally come around and, okay, here's what I said. I used to say what you thought I said, or what was passed on, and it's totally different. Or maybe it's a little similar. This is why we must be solid students of the truth, the Bible. Especially the New Testament, the King James Version Bible, for English speakers. The same is going to be that old-fashioned truth. It doesn't change. We don't need something updated or trendy. 2,000 years old it is. Red text, we need to keep politics, dogma, tradition, philosophies, I'll read the other red text, out of what the things are that we commit to faithful men. So you can have your views on those things, but what you're committing, the main thing, the focus is to solid truths that aren't going to change, and they're truth. I'll just be honest with you, I put in my opinion on things, and hopefully it's just already understood that's my opinion, or I'm not sure about what a passage is saying. Hopefully I say that, and you can believe how you want to on it. But there's other things that hopefully you understand are this is the way it is, best I can tell. And you got to believe this. You don't have to, but as a man being trained, there are some things that I expect you to believe, like Jesus is God. If you don't believe that Jesus was Melchizedek, we're okay. It's going to be okay. If you believe the sons of God were actually devils coming down and marrying women, cohabitating with him, hey Dad, all that, okay. Weird, but okay. You know, lots of men that believe that are good pastors. Black text. The teacher needs to make very sure that it is the same and exactly the same. Not close to it. On the key, doctrinal issues, and you got to figure out what those are. You don't want to water it down. You don't want to update it. You got to actually also, on my part, I got to make sure that not just they can spit it out for a test, but they truly believe this thing. They're convicted on it. And that's a tricky area because I don't necessarily just know that from you. Because you can agree, but deep down inside you might be going, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But I'm not going to say anything because I understand, but I think you know at least what I'm saying. I don't know how to find that out for sure. Well, truthfully, you need to be committing to faithful men the exact same things that the New Testament clearly states. Not my opinion, though I can say it, but I don't expect you to believe what my opinion is, or church dogma, or just how we do things. If it's one's opinion, then make sure to clearly state that, and don't expect them to have the same opinion you have when it's just your opinion. Of course, everything is opinion, but where you're stating this, I don't know, it's my opinion, versus this is the way it is, in my opinion. There's thus saith the Lord, and there's thus saith Pastor Warner. We want to know thus saith the Lord. In preparation for the ministry, the things that are taught to the student need to be solidly supported by Scripture. There will be philosophies and ideas and kind of where you lean to that a pastor may teach concerning a particular issue, but they need to be explained as such and not be relied upon as solid truth. Hopefully you understand the spirit of all this, trying to separate what is considered is undebatable, there's no changes to it, this is the way it's got to be, versus, oh, not sure. Pretty sure maybe, but not sure. You can change on this one. I can understand that. Like some of these things, though, some might say are too big a deal to change, but you might have a different view on reprobation than I do. Passage in Romans 1. So many students are led astray as their teacher proclaims such to be truth when it is not truth. The teaching doesn't have many supporting Bible passages backing it up. It ought at least be questioned, or not even considered a truth, just a thought, a position maybe you have. The more Bible that a student knows, the more truth that they will know. So you got to teach them Bible. Red text, the Bible needs to be the clear, dominant information source put out in churches' Bible colleges. So you can say, well, there isn't very much Bible in this lecture. Well, it's all based on one verse. We're just diving in. We need to expound on it. But yes, you're right. There's just that one little verse and just scattered throughout here. We do have a 3-year course on New Testament survey, where we go through every verse in the New Testament and expound upon it. So we are doing that. You can always have more Bible in it, though. You could. B, I'm not sure, oh, this is under 2. Same things, commit thou to faithful men. So they need to be committed, these same things. It is an entrusting of the most important set of truths that can be known. Committed. There is nothing more important than one can commit, or that one can be entrusted with. Oh, the pastor, the Timothy, the Paul, needs to understand the great privilege, the great responsibility he has in committing of the truth. Privilege is spelled wrong. This committing is not done by osmosis. It is not done solely through just like Sunday school, or just attending Sunday preaching services, or reading some books. Red text, this committing that's talked about here, I believe, is to be done primarily through specialized Bible training outside of the main preaching and teaching venues of a church. So this is what we see Jesus and I think Paul doing. And this is what we do. Of course, there's teaching and preaching. Yeah, there's truths being taught during Sunday school and the preaching services. Yeah, but that's not where you're going to, that wouldn't be the training program. But some preachers, that's the training program. I've heard one, or maybe several, they got trained just by Sunday school class. Sunday school was the training time. So for 40 minutes every Sunday, there was training. So how much training would that be in 3 or 4 years? I don't know. Some, not that much. So I just see Jesus teaching. I don't even see him having services. He just went around teaching, and they went around with him. Black text, of course, one should teach and preach, like I said here, to 3 or 4 standard services per week. But it's not just there. In fact, it's mainly outside of that, I would believe. A lot more than that. A special time needs to be set aside for the training of the church's future leaders, teachers, preachers. It's the ideal method of committing these same things from the Bible, like I'm doing here. A special, focused time of doing that. This is what we plainly see Jesus doing with his disciples through the pages of the Gospels, and especially when he was with the 12. because he's training them specifically for the ministry. And I'm not necessarily going to be training or wanting to train everyone for the ministry Sunday morning and the preaching hour. Probably the vast majority of them don't have any interest in entering the full-time ministry, but I think you do. Yeah. So we've singled you out, sir. So where did I leave off? This is what we see Jesus doing. Should this training be just once a week, 3 days a week, or 3 times a week, every day of the week, an hour a week, 5 hours a week, 20 hours a week, 60 hours a week? Brother Bo's going, yeah, 60. Sounds good. The committing, it doesn't have any time limitation other than sleep and eating, I guess. A couple more here and then we'll take a break. Red text, Jesus is committing to his disciples, I don't know about this 10-hour thing, but we'll just know that, it seemed to be a 10-hour plus, 10 plus hour per day of this, every day of the week. I don't know about the Sabbath, but just go. Every day of the week type of plan. Just get the idea of what it is for 3 years straight. You don't have to memorize everything there. 10 hour doesn't matter. It just matters that it's like all the time while they're awake. Apparently every day for 3 years straight. Black text, the committing limitations is dependent upon, well, teacher availability and how willing the teacher is. Upon student availability and their willingness. Yeah, those two. Are you willing to be committed? I feel that the training for the ministry done by a church should not be less impressive than the training done by an unscriptural pastor training entity like colleges, seminaries, and the like. So it shouldn't be done cheaply, ineptly, sloppily. Thus the church's Bible college program needs to not be weak, unstructured, unprofessional, simplistic, or like the bare minimum. It'll just get by. Why couldn't a church train its students Monday through Friday for 5 to 8 hours a day? Why couldn't it? Why? What's the answer? I can tell you some whys. I don't know if I can do it, but I don't know if I'm willing to do that, number one. I guess I would be. Or I'd have to be. 2 is availability on my part. Then you switch over to the students. 5 to 8 hours. How are you going to do that? Because of the willingness and availability. Because it's just too much, it's thinking too big, because it's expecting too much. Well, I'm for it, but we might have to transition into that, not just next week we do 5 to 8 hours a day.